So I wanted to do a video on non-thinking, the state and experience of not engaging in thinking and just experiencing the world without our thoughts about the world. And I wanted to do the video because if I went back 30 years ago, it would have been inconceivable to my very rapid paced thinking mind that such a state was even possible, let alone that it involved a voluntary component. And I'm not conjuring up images of self or ego or anything. I'm just relating the experience the best I can. So there are three things that happen along the way. The first is you just cease to find them interesting any longer. There's, it's like the entertainment value of thinking goes from like a 10 to like a 2. And you recognize that thinking only has a few themes to it, and it shows up in a few different forms, but it's basically the same old song and dance, as they say. And how many times can you play the hero or the victim? How many times can you replay the past? And how many times can you think about the future, particularly when you start to recognize that your thoughts about the future rarely turn out the way you think they will? And this leads into the second point, and that is a lack of trust in the thinking process. And this is one of the things that we're in a really interesting historical time because we've got cognitive science, we've got cognitive behavioral therapy, and they're all showing us how off our thoughts are. Not only are our thoughts about the world not accurate, but they cause suffering. And so there's simply this, you could say the trust in thinking is maxed out when we are engaging in thought all the time. But after a while, this sense of trust decreases to the point that, again, it's not interesting any longer and you don't trust these thoughts. And some of that also comes about because you start to recognize, again, I know you have to be particular with the language. I'm not saying there's a you who has to recognize this. There's just the experience of it, that the thoughts aren't even yours. And so the thoughts that you keep replaying in your head every day, you didn't come up with them, you didn't invent them. Most of them are just social constructs. Things like, well, if I have to make so much money by this age or I won't be successful, it's literally like every single word in that sentence is just simply not accurate. There's nothing to trust in any of it, even age alone. So am I supposed to be 54? I mean, as a convention, as a useful tool to get along with other people, it works. But to really believe it, that's a whole different picture. The last thing I'll talk about along the way to non-thinking is that the mind has a certain momentum to it, and you've probably experienced this. If you get the mind worked up, and it's just like a big truck, and the faster, the more weight it has, the more difficult it is to slow down, and that's the way the mind is. And if you get it really going, it's difficult. If someone having a panic attack, it would be really difficult to just say, look, slow your mind down. But once you start engaging in the first two, there's a natural sense where it slows and slows, and you may not even notice it slowing until all of a sudden you realize that it stopped altogether. And then there's this wonderful experience of peace and non-thinking. And it doesn't really matter how long these moments are. Um, their own they're self-evident that the state is possible. And so a couple things happen on the way to non-thinking.